But the second archetype were aliens. And by aliens, I don't just mean creatures coming from outer space. What I mean is somebody who's completely non-human. Not a monster, not somebody who was bitten and who, is faced with losing their humanity or you once was a human or anything like that. I mean a non-human character. So an alien from science fiction or a dwarf or an elf or something like that from fantasy, anything like that. These are characters of non-human origin. But like I said, you've got to work from a human basis as a writer, and readers are going to look for some level of humanity to link them in. Now, we covered this a little bit about people trying to say that orcs are racist or something like that. And we were talking about how the different fantasy types reflect certain human traits. So to start with a good alien, whether it's an alien from space or a alien being like from a fantasy world or something like that, an elf, a dwarf, or whatever, you have to start with some aspect of humanity and then magnify that. And you start with that. And I say these kinds of things and people think, well, there's more to them than that, this and that. Of course, once you get into the stories and once you start writing about just that race, you have to develop it in three-dimensional, make it a little bit more 3 dimensions. But it's not, it has to start with this. So the dwarves are greed, the dwarves are not in a bad way necessarily, but the elves are, depending on what the elves are, this aesthetic type creature and so forth. In science fiction, I mean, Vulcans are logic. That's the human trait that they exist to embody to the. Now, again, you could tell stories about Vulcans themselves, and then you can, see different variations within the race and whatnot. But they start with logic. Klingons are warring. Klingons are warfare and honor and that kind of thing, and that's their human trait that they're really building up. So you see that a lot in Star Trek. You see that a lot in a lot of classic science fiction. Of course, you can go into some different dimensions of it at that point. But the aliens are there, and again, aliens, whether that's space aliens or just fantasy type creatures or whatever, they're non-human creatures, but they're there to recontextualize. That's the word. They want to recontextualize a human trait, magnify it, spin it around, look at it in a different angle. I mean, that's what Tolkien did with the dwarves in The Hobbit. Bilbo going and learning from the hobbits, and he learned their this insatiable love for treasure. And you think about Bilbo's time with Thorin Oakenshield, and Thorin resisted that great madness, of his father and grandfather for the time. But the what was the stone? The Arkenstone, I think it was called. I'm blanking on some terms right now. But yeah, that's the thing. So you've got to use them properly. So if you are writing a fantasy or a science fiction story and you have alien beings, you might think it's cliche, but you do have to start with that. Okay, this type of alien being, that's just how humans are gonna perceive it. If you just throw in a bunch of alien beings into your science fiction and you don't give your readers some human trait to kind of hang their understanding of each being on, then you're going to lose your readers pretty quickly, at least at first. So again, that's an aspect of that. Yoda, for example, if I'm not going to say it's impossible for Yoda to have been written as a human, he could have, but the fact that he's an alien, specifically the fact that he's this unknown alien origin, we don't really know much about his race at all, that helps us believe how he could be such a master within the Force and truly be so self-controlled and truly be of the power and of the self-control and of the light side, firm grasp that he has on it. You wouldn't be, I don't think you could argue that a human quite had that in that same way, in that same sort of paragon fashion. I mean, Luke certainly goes on to levels of that, but thinking of him as an alien helps with that. Back to the drawing board, where do gods fall in this non-human archetype list? Are they just super powerful representatives or other archetypes? Great question. I'm really glad you mentioned gods, because they do fall under this alien kind of idea. And the Greek pantheon, ancient Greece's pantheon, is a perfect example of this. Look at the 12 Olympians, for example, and you've got gods who are representative of certain human traits at certain times in certain ways. Again, you can tell stories about just one or the other, and there are different aspects to them, but they tend to be, the traits that they tend to represent are the things that they're the gods of. So Zeus, on one level, he's the god of justice, because he was the god of, bringing justice to humanity and whatnot. But so he had a thunderbolt, for that. But he's also the god of licentiousness, the god of completely unable to control himself, and so forth like that. Venus, the god of erotic love, and you've also got her, you know, stories of her lust everywhere. Likewise with Cupid, Ares, you know, god of war. I mean, he's basically a Klingon. I mean, basically, you know, and a lot of that type. So yeah, god characters in mythology are, if you're using a pantheon of gods in one of your works, then yeah, they tend to fall under this aliens category as well.